Hilchas Mechirah Perek Shiva V'Esrim. So until now we were learning about when a person sells a field, a person sells a house, a person sells a chotzer, a person sells an ear, all things of karka, what's included in that sale. Now we're learning about things that are metalton. A person sells a ship, a person sells a wagon, what is considered, or a person sells a behemoth, what's considered in that sale. That's the what we're learning here by Hamshach. Perek Shiva V'Esrim. And just like we learned before that all those dinim only apply in a place where there's no minik, but when there's a minik, so you go bust the minik. So over here also, when you get these dinim that we're going to learn, the Ram will say again that all these dinim apply in a place when there's no minik. So Chazal are telling us what's the pashtus advarim when there's no minik. Masha'inkan, when there is a specific minik, so then you always go bust the minik. Perek Shiva V'Esrim. Hamoicheres hasfina, a person sells a ship, is mocheres hatoirin, so he sold the mast. Mast is the large pole on which the sails hang on, and v'esanes, and also the sails, which cause the ship to go. V'eshagonim shelo, hagonim are the anchors, which are used to anchor the ship. V'eskol ha-meshutim hamanhignoisa, and all the oars which are used in order to move it, and also the ropes which cause to steer it. And v'es ha-kevesh, the kevesh is the ramp to go off the ship, and v'askala, and the ladder, sha'osim bem l'svina, sha'olim bem l'svina, v'yerdin to get onto the ship, or to get off the ship, so there would be a ramp and a ladder, which they would use to get off and on the ship. And also, beis hamayim shebetecha, the reservoir of water that the ship contained, so that's all part of the ship. So part of the ship includes this mast, which is the pole, and the sails, and the anchor, and the ropes that are used to steer the ship, and also the ramp and the ladder, which are all used to get off and on the ship. And also the beis hamayim, the reservoir of water. Avolei mocheres habitzis, you didn't sell the bitzis. What's the bitzis? V'hi hasfina haktana sheilchim bo alamayim akrevim liabosha. When you get near dry land, so you have a little ship to be able to go in. The ship can't go all the way to the shallow land, so you have a little ship to be able to bring people into the abosha. And also v'lei mocher hadugis. Hadugis is also v'hi hasfina haktana. It's also a little ship, which sod ba malachim esadog. That's when the sailors go down onto this little ship when they're in the ocean and they catch fish. And also the slaves which are part of the ship, which work on the ship, that's not part of the ship. And also and not the leather sacks which are on the ship, which holds the scheir of the ship. And also and you also didn't sell the scheir which are in these sacks. However, bisman sha'amar loihi v'chol ma shebetecha, if he said the ship and everything that the ship contains, ani meicher, is then agadikulim mechurim. So again, when a person sells a ship, so it includes those things that are part of the ship, which is the mast and the sails and those things which are essential for the ship. Also the ramp and the ladder which go off and onto the ship, the reservoir of water. Masha'inkin, those things that are an additional to the ship. Like for example, the little ship that you bring people from the ship to dry land, or the little ship which are used to go around fishing, or the slaves which are working on the ship, or the scheir which the ship is moving, or the leather bags that the ship has. These are all not part of the ship, unless he said that the svina v'chol hasheba. If he said v'chol mashebetecha, he v'chol mashebetecha, so that includes all these things which the Rambam said weren't included. Halacha beis hamecheres hakaron. A person sells a carriage. Is lay mocheres hapradas. He didn't sell the mules. Bisman she'ein kshurisim. So if there's a carriage and there are mules that are used to move this carriage, but since they're not attached, so by selling the carriage, you're not selling the mules, unless if the mules are attached. So then we can understand that since the carriage needs the mules to go, so by selling the carriage means you're selling the carriage with the mules. But that's only if the mules are attached. Now, mocheres hapradas, if you sold the prodis, the mules, so lay mocheres hakaron, you didn't sell the carriage even if the karon is attached, because the mules have a function without the carriage. Whereas the carriage really doesn't have a function without the mules. So therefore, if you sell the carriage while the mules are attached, we assume that the mules are part of the deal. Masha'inkin, if you sell the mules, even though the carriage is attached, the mules is a separate deal. Now, mocheres at semet. Semet is a contraption that you put together a bunch of oxen in order for them to work together. So you sold this semet, this contraption which connects, it's like a yoke that goes on a few oxen together. is Machris HaTzemed, Le Machris HaBakar. That's not really selling the bakar. They're separate entities. However, and also Machris HaBakar, Le Machris HaTzemed. So both ways, if you sell the tzemed, you didn't sell the bakar, and if you sell the bakar, you didn't sell the tzemed. Now the Maggid Mishnah says that this din, even though it doesn't say really Pashtus and Rambam, that Machris HaTzemed, the Machris HaBakar is only when they're detached. Masha'enkin, if they're attached, if the tzemed and the bakar are attached, so just like we said before, that HaMoichers HaKarin, when the brothers are attached, so the brothers are part of it. So the Rambam didn't say it clearly, but the Rambam said that the din that they're not a koine is only bizman she'ein kshuris yimei. So al derazeh machris hatzemed lebachris habakar is only when they're ein kshuris yimei. Masha'enkin, the din of machris habakar v'limachris hatzemed is even if they're kshuris yimei, because the same principle. The tzemed has no function without the bakar, but on the other end, the bakar has a function without the tzemed. And vafilu b'makim shekerin miksasin l'tzemed bakar. So nevertheless, lepel, even if you called it tzemed bakar, but lepel, because it's called a tzemed bakar. There was a gathering of the bakar, but nevertheless, when you sell the bakar, you didn't sell the tzemed. Even though you call the tzemed bakar, but nevertheless, when you say you're selling the bakar, you're not including the tzemed. Halacha gimel. Hamoicher so'oil, when a person sells a yoke, now the yoke is, you have the thing that you plow with, and that's connected with a long stick, and that's how it connects to the animal, that the animal has this yoke on its head, and this stick, which goes from the knife that plows, in other words, from the plow, so the yoke extends from the actual plow until the head of the animal, and that's how it's connected. So when a person sells the yoke, so he's really selling the parah, because the yoke has no function without the parah. The yoke needs the parah to function. And vice versa, that's even when they're not connected, because since the yoke and the parah are so connected, so therefore when you sell the yoke, you're basically selling the parah with it. However, machar sapara, when a person sells the parah, is lay machar so'el, he didn't sell the oil. Now machar ha'agola, when a person sells a wagon, so that's machar ha'bakar, he also sold the agola. However, machar ha'bakar, lay machar ha'agola. And really, vice versa over here is that when you're machar ha'agola, you're machar ha'bakar, even if they're not connected. Now, Shulchura, before we learned when machar ha'karin is you only sell the produce, the mules, when they're connected. Mashiach, when they're not connected, it wasn't a sale. And over here, we're saying that when you sell an agola is a wagon, so you are selling the bakar. So you have to explain, that's how the Mefarshim explain, that the bakar and the agola are more connected than the karin and the produce. Somewhere or another, in the agola, it's clear that it's there for the bakar. So therefore, when you machar so agola, you need a bakar. So machar so agola, when a person sells agola, it's a different type of wagon, a karin and an agola. So when a person sells an agola, so that sells the bakar as well, even if the bakar is not attached. Masha'en kain, when you sell a karin, you only sell the produce when the produce are attached. Now, but either way, machar is habakar, le machar is agola. By selling the bakar, you never sell the agola. You want to know whether you were really selling both. So the fact how much you paid for it is not really part of the equation. In other words, you're not going to say, well, let's take a look how much you paid for it, and then we'll decide what was meant in the sale. The money that you paid for it is not going to determine what was part of the sale. It's nachma. Let's just go over it again. So we have this din benegeh, the sfina, that by the sfina, what's considered part of the sfina, what's not considered part of the sfina. Now we have the wagon and the produce. So if you have a wagon attached to produce, attached to a mule, so when you sell the wagon, it includes the mule. When you sell the mule, it doesn't include the wagon. Masha'enkin, if the wagon is not attached to the mules, so either way, so when you sell either of them, it's not including the other one. Al that is when you have a tzemed bakar, so you have a tzemed in the bakar, which is the contraption that puts all the oxen together. So I mean, the Ram doesn't say this clearly, but based on the Maggid Mishnah, if they're attached, the tzemed and the bakar are attached, the tzemed bakar and the bakar are attached. So when you sell the tzemed bakar, so you include the bakar. Masha'enkin, if you sell the bakar, it doesn't include the tzemed bakar. Masha'enkin, when they're detached, so then whether you sell the tzemed bakar, it's not including the bakar. When you're selling the tzemed, it's not including the bakar. And when the bakar is not including the tzemed. So basically, the tzemed legabi the bakar is like the karin legabi the produce. Now here, when you get on oil, is different. By an oil, it's already different. That when you sell the oil, so that's already considered selling the para, even if the para is not attached. Even if the para is not attached. And al derazeh, when you sell an agola, that's considered that you're selling the bakar, again, even if the bakar is not attached. Masha'inkin, if you're selling the bakar, or you're selling the para, so then it's the same din. That's not really including the oil, and the bakar is not including the agola. Halacha dalet. V'chein, hamoicher is a chamer, person sells a chamer, a donkey, is machar is hamirdas, so he sold the mirdas, which is the covering, in other words, either made out of cloth or leather that you put over the chamer, and also vesa ukav. Ukav is the saddle that you put on top of the mirdas. In other words, there's a cloth covering over the chamer, and there's also an ukav that you put on top of the mirdas. Va'afal pisha ein and olav, even if lepel this ukav and this mardash aren't on the chamer, but we assume that when you're selling the chamer, the pashtus, it's including the merdas and the ukav. Aval le'mocher is a sack. That doesn't include the sack, which is normally carried together with the chamer. When a person's riding a chamer on a donkey, so he also has a sack. That's not considered part of the chamer. And also v'lei merkeves hanoshim. And there's like a special attachment. If a woman is sitting on the chamer, so when a man sits on the chamer, so his legs are on both sides of the chamer. Mashenka, when a woman sits on a chamer, so she sits with her legs on one side of the chamer. So memela, so there's a special merkeves hanoshim which you put on top of the chamer for noshim. That is not included in part of the sale of the chamer. So the mirdas and the ukav are considered part of the sale. Masha'inkin, the sack and the merkeves hanoshim are not considered part of the sale. And vafilo hayolu b'shas hamecher, even if this merkeves hanoshim or this sack were actually on the chamer while the sale was taking place, but nevertheless, that's not part of the sale. The ein hadomim raya, and how much you paid for it is not really a raya of how much what it was. She'im toh b'chdei shadas toya. In other words, if there was a mistake in a way that you made a mistake, maybe you overestimated or underestimated the price, so then is yesh le'inoi bitul mekach kedin kol ha'mecher v'lekech. Whereas then you go ahead with the hilchas ino, regular din of bitul mekach or ino. In other words, it depends if it's a sixth of the price or more than a sixth. So you have the regular dinim of ino if the price was overpriced. Now, toh b'chdei she'ein hadas noita in toya. In other words, if it was such a difference in price that you couldn't have made such a mistake, so obviously you knew that you were being overpaid or underpaid. It's obvious that you knew you were overpaid and underpaid. So then le bitla mekach, the mekach is not bottle. Shezeh matanan asnei, because we assume that it was given being as a present. Whoever overpaid was giving a present, or whoever was underpaid. So in other words, he was giving a present. The ein le ala chamer b'lei sakim v'chein kol kiyes b'zeh ein meviim beirayim and adam. So in other words, we're trying to figure out whether or not he sold him a chamer. So we say he definitely sold him the chamer without the sakim. He paid him so much money, so l'chura that'll be a raya that the sakim were included in the sale. Say no. Lepel, he sold him the chamer. The chamer has nothing to do with the sakim. The sakim is not part of the sale. He overpaid. So then we have to look, say how much did he overpay? If he overpaid, but they shadas neita, so then we go with the halachas of eino, of bitul mekach or machzer eino. And if he overpaid to the extent where ein hadas teya, so he overpaid way over the price, and therefore you can't say it was a mistake. So obviously it was given as a present. So that's these dinim. That again we're saying that the domim is not a raya what happened of it. Halacha vav. Hamoicher is hashivcha, when a person sells a shivcha, a maidservant, is machar kelim shelah, so he's also selling the clothes which is on her. All the clothes which she's wearing are all part of the sale. Afila hinmeya, even if there's 100 pieces of clothes on her, they're all part of the sale. Avalei machar is hashirim, v'lei anizom, v'lei atabois, and the jewelry, which is the bracelets, or the nose rings, or the regular rings, and v'lei akatloi shebetsavara, the necklaces which are on her neck. So then all these things aren't included in the sale. You know, she was wearing it, maybe they want to adore it to show how, in that state. But lepel mamish, we assume that the clothes she's wearing, all the clothes she's wearing, even if she's wearing a lot of pieces of clothes, they're all included in the sale. Mashenkin, any jewelry that she's wearing is not part of the sale. However, v'amalei shivcha v'chol mashalei clearly said the moicher that I'm selling you the shivcha and everything she's wearing, that's on top of her, is arikul mechurim. Even if she's wearing clothes or jewelry which is worth meyamana, a lot of money, but nevertheless, since he said clearly, shivcha v'chol mashaleh, so everything is included in the sale. Halacha zayin. Ha'omer lechaveirei shivcha mu'beres ani mechalach. I'm selling you a pregnant shivcha. Or para mu'beres ani mechalach. I'm selling you a pregnant para. Is machales havlad. So then the vlad is included. However, if he said shivcha minika ani mechalach, or para minika ani mechalach, a nursing shivcha, or a para which is giving milk, is lay machales havlad. Basically, he's not saying I'm giving you the vlad as well. Just tell you that this para I'm giving you, or this shivcha I'm giving you, is a shivcha which is presently nursing. Chameire minika ani mechalach. When he says a chameire minika, a nursing chamer, so then machales asayach, then he also sold him that baby chamer, because ein adam keina chamer lechalava. A person doesn't buy a chamer for the milk that the chamer is going to produce. So maybe when I say a milking chamer, basically means to say a chamer which has a child and is milking it. So basically we're talking about the chamer and the milk, because the milk that the chamer produces without the sayach is meaningless. It's not, you're not adding anything to the sale. You're not enhancing the sale by adding that it's a milking chamer, unless you're giving the sayach as well. Halacha ches. So eimel lechavere reish eved zeh, or reish chamer zeh ani mechalach. I'm selling you the head of this eved, or the head of this chamer, a live eved or live chamer. So the din is harei mocher ches. So it's like basically saying, I'm going to be a shutif with you in this chamer. I'm selling you half of the eved and half of the chamer. When he sells him an Ever Shanashoma Tluyabay, basically means he say that we're going to become shutfim in this Eved. Omerle, Yad Eved Zeh, Yad Chamer Zeh Ani Mechalach. So it's talking about something that's not Hanashoma Tluyabach, is Misham Nebineim. So then we assess between the two. In other words, the original owner owns the Eved, but he's also selling him the hand, which means whatever work this Eved could do with his hand, or whatever value this Yad Chamer would have for whoever owns this chamer. Now, Omerle reish parazu ani mechalach. So we're talking about an eved and a chamer, so it's not something edible. So obviously, when he says the reish, it means he's selling half of it. Masha'ini, when a person says reish parazu, I'm selling you the head of this para, so it's literally I'm selling you the head. Leimacher ela reish bulvad. He means to sell. He's selling the head. Shariration and karas tamid mitbachayim. Once you shech the beima, so then and it's shechted, so then you could give the rush, you sell the rush. So when he's selling the rush while it's alive, basically he means to say he's not selling the behemoth, he's not selling half of the behemoth, he's selling the rush literally, that when the behemoth will be geschachten, so that rush will belong to the buyer. Now, machers harush bebehemoth gasa, when a person sells the head of a behemoth gasa, is lay machers haraglaim. We don't assume that together with the rush goes the raglaim. This rush is a separate entity, it's a large rush, so therefore it has a value in itself, and it doesn't necessarily go with the raglaim. However, and machers haraglaim, if he sells the raglaim, is also lay machers haresh. We don't assume that the roish goes together with the raglaim. B'negea bein magasa. Machers hakona, if a person sells the kona that goes down to the lungs, and that's also attached eventually to the liver, so you say machers hakona, when a person sells this kona together with the lungs, is lay machers hakovid, that's not connected, that you don't also selling the kovid, which is the liver, and machers hakovid, le machers hakona. The point is, we'll soon see that in a behemoth daka is different. A behemoth daka, since it's a small behemoth, so normally we assume that there's vice a regular thing that when you sell the head, you also sell the feet. When you sell the kona, you're selling the kovid as well. Mashenk in a behemoth gasa, since it's a large behemoth, so each thing has its own kshivas. So selling one doesn't mean selling the other. So as a machers hakona, lay machers hakovid, by selling the kana which goes into the lungs, you're not selling the kovid, which is the liver. Machers hakovid, selling the liver, lay machers hakana. That's all talking about a behemoth gasa. So the reish has nothing to do with the raglayim, and alderes of the kana has nothing to do with the kovid. Avol bebehemoth daka, when you're selling of a behemoth daka, is machers hareish. So is machers raglayim, because vice that's the normal upmach. If you're buying the head, you take the raglayim as well. But machers raglayim, le machers hareish. By buying the raglayim, you're not buying the reish. But by buying the reish, you are buying the raglayim. Now that is a machers hakona, machers hakovid, le machers hakona. So the kana without the kovid isn't kosher, but the kovid without the kana is kosher. So therefore, when you sell one, it's not a right that you're selling the other. Halacha yud. Hamoicher is a bear. Someone sells a bear, and the bear has water. Is like machers meimov. Doesn't assume that you're talking about the water as well. You're only talking about the bear. The water is a separate Indian. Machers ashpa. If a person sells a place where they dump zevel garbage is mocher zivla. So then you assume that he also selling the zevel which is in the ashba. Mocher kaveres, when a person sells a beehive, so is mocher dverim. So we assume that he's also selling the bees of the beehive. And mocher shevach, when a person sells a dove, a shevach, which for doves is mocher sayenim, so he's also selling the yenim which are in the shevach. Halacha yudalav al yolos meinecha, shouldn't let it go away from your eyes. Ha'ikar agadol b'dvarim elu. The ikar advarim is minig hamedina. Whereas the minig hamedina is the ikar agadol, whatever the minig hamedina is, and also v'hashemes hayeduim b'yichud l'chol davar. The vocabulary knows what people mean when they say things. B'makom she'ein minig, a place where there's no minig, and also v'lei shem shakel emrei b'yichud b'lei shita, which should be not v'lei shita b'lei shita. When knows that everyone calls a certain thing one thing. There's no one person calls it one thing, a person calls it another thing. Shita would mean that the same word sometimes means this, sometimes means that. No, the makom she'ein minig v'lei shem, and there's no specific name. Shahakel emrim le'biyichud, that everyone knows exactly what they're saying. B'lei shita. We're talking about in a place where one person says this and he means this, and one person says this and he means something else. And it's not very clear what it's meant. So then, then we go after these rules that bir chacham, these rules, k'mei shebiyani, like we said, like we learned. So these rules only apply in a place where there's no minig and there's also no shemus yeduyim for specific items.